Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Space Game Junkie podcast. I, as always, am your co-host, Brian, and joining me, as always, your co-host, Spaz.
Hello.
We're doing an early morning show this morning, our time at least, at 6 a.m. Here in the west coast of the America. Oh, my God. I'm already messing up. But we're doing that because our guest is in Belgrade, Serbia. Joining us, good morning. Joining us from Zero Gravity Games is, okay, here we go, Milos Zivkovic. How'd I do?
Okay, good enough.
Yay! I'm just going to call you Milos. He also goes online as ZG Smorty. Y'all may know him as that. So that's your moniker, as it were. And you are the game designer and story writer of Hellion, the game we're going to be talking about today. Welcome.
Yep, that's right. Good to be here.
So, folks, it's very good to have you. Thank you. So, folks, if you're not aware, Hellion is a first-person. It looks like, is it single player and multiplayer? Or is it just multiplayer?
Just multiplayer.
It's a first-person multiplayer space survival game where you have to manage not only like just about every aspect of your own like survival with your suits, oxygen, and whatnot, but like the stations and the ships you encounter have all these stations that you have to manage their life support and their power, and some things have a power generator and some things only have solar power. It's really intricate. The video that I recorded that's on the background of the stream, please don't use that as an indicator of the game quality. I'm terrible at this game because I'm terrible at survival games in general. So please don't take my horrible being flung out of multiple airlocks gameplay, which does happen like 3 times, I think, in the video. Like, what did you expect, Brian? But let's start at the beginning. So, Milos, you said you've been working for this, for Zero Gravity Games for a couple years now. Is that when Hellion got off the ground?
Yeah, generally this is when the project got off the ground for real. Zero Gravity as a studio was formed about 2 years ago in August 2015, but the idea for a game existed as early as 2013. But at that time, it was more like a garage development, you could call it. Just a few friends having a dream of creating a space survival game. But in 2015, we started for real.
Okay, so yeah, I got to admit, well, the first time I got a key for this was, I think, February, many months ago, and the first time I played it, I have a slightly older system. It's like an i9 with a 770 card, and it runs most things great, but your game chugged a bit, so early access. So I figured I'd shelve it for a while and come back to it later after it got optimized. And I gotta say, you guys have done a great job. It ran pretty buttery smooth on my machine yesterday. So well done there. So you guys have been really working hard on this thing. So well done.
Yeah, in general, one of our focuses, especially after release, was fixing all the inevitable bugs. Most of them are squashed by now. Some of them still persist, but one of the biggest things we had to work on was general optimization. There's still a lot of work to do, but as I said, the game runs a lot smoother at this point, of course.
It really does. What's the engine you guys are using?
We're using Unity engine. That's what the most guys at the company are proficient with, and so far it offered us decent amount of flexibility, and it allowed us to create Hellion. So, Unity.
I have to say, one of the great things about Unity is when it's done. It's when it's developed well. You don't realize it's Unity. Like Unity, another developer told us this. Unity gets a bad rap because a lot of crap games that are made with Unity, they use the free version, which doesn't get rid of the splash screen. You know, but when you're a pro and you're using the full version, you know, you don't even realize it's Unity. So well done. I didn't know this is Unity at all. Because
Unity is a decent engine in general. It just comes down to how skilled and how proficient the person working in it is. That's just what it comes down to. Most people say what you say because a lot of the games done in Unity is easy to get into. It's noob friendly, you could say, and there's a lot of people putting out games, you know, without that's I wouldn't say without proper experience, but you see a lot of those self-developed games out there, and that's probably why it gets so much bad rap. But as you said, when it's done properly, it's done properly.
exactly. So had you guys worked on any games before this, either as a team or individually? Had you guys made any games before this?
Guys from the studio earlier worked as mostly as freelancers, so it would be like on contract jobs for web browser games and stuff like that. But no, Hellion would be a first proper game we've decided to make.
Wow. And so let's talk about the game. Basically, you wake up at the very start of the game. You wake up on a space station in this. The system is called Hellion that you're in. That's where the name of the game comes from, right? That's the name of the area of space you're in, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, it's the name of the system and the name of a star. The idea is you wake up after this kind of a failed colonization mission that took like 100 years to travel from Earth to Hellion. They picked it as a destination. You were supposed to wake up in a man-made paradise, but apparently, as it usually goes, somewhere along the lines, something went wrong, and now you're waking up in a station that's practically barely working, and the system is falling apart.
Right, and I really liked how the tutorial was. I have to admit the tutorial was almost a little too seamless because I missed the part where it told you how to refill your oxygen. So somehow I missed that and never got around to doing it. But for the most part, it was pretty straightforward, which is great for a game that is pretty complex. Really, this is a pretty complex game. I mean, you have full zero gravity and everything. It's really insane. So what? Is the purpose just survival? Is there going to be a story to it? Is there going to be, like, besides survival? Are there other goals besides survival and like messing with other players? Are there other goals?
Yes, there will be. Story will play a big part in Hellion. We are still working on properly implementing all the mechanics that would be necessary to tell it in a way that we want to do so. And Hellion will not be exactly story driven, but there will be a lot of background lore, a lot of information that will eventually lead players to certain conclusions and let them actually discover what went wrong and generally how to understand what exactly happened in the Hellion system. But as I said, it's not fully implemented yet. We only had bits and pieces so far, but it's definitely planned to introduce something, as you said, more than just a survival and multiplayer element.
Well, yeah, sure.
You're still in alpha, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We're still pretty early in the development, and
Wow.
we're still working on it, basically.
I gotta say, for an alpha, it seemed really, really stable. I did have one crash when I was looking at the glossary, and I tried to go back into the game, and it crashed. But besides that, it ran really well, and I would have thought. I mean, this. Oh my god! Sorry, early in the morning, folks. Yeah, this is. I would not have thought this is just an alpha. You know, I thought it felt like a further along game than that. You know what I mean? So well done there. So you guys went on Steam like public alpha like earlier this year, right? If I'm remembering correctly. Was it earlier this
Yeah,
year?
it was in February.
Right, around February. And how has that been going for you guys? How are you guys finding the community and or the early access process in general?
It's actually pretty interesting. In general, the community, the people that really got into the game, despite many of its faults, especially during the first few days, they really showed enormous support, enormous enthusiasm for the game in general. So we found ourselves relying more and more on community feedback, and that's kind of the basics of any early access model. And we're really, really liking it so far.
Yeah, that is great. Because I see a lot of I see some developers don't handle early access well, and they're either in early access too long and they're not communicative enough, that sort of thing.
Or a
But
little
that
of both.
Yeah, or both. But you guys don't seem to have that issue. I was looking at your forums and they seem pretty active, and you guys seem pretty on point with responses. So that's super important if you're a developer, by the way, and listening. But also, that's really good that you guys are being very active with the community, because that can go such a long way toward fostering goodwill. You know.
Yeah, well, in general, when we started out first, we had a lot of what you could call like experimental gameplay concepts, especially the full Newtonian physics and orbital mechanics. And weren't really sure how well the community would accept, how players around the world would accept these features, because they're not commonly found in many games. But so far, it's been pretty good. We've been listening to the community, especially, certain complaints or suggestions for improvements. And all I can say is that the game is much better for it.
We have a question from the YouTube chat. How many people are on the team working on this?
At the moment, we have 9 people that are representing the core of our team. But over the course of the game, we had up to 30 people working on a project at one point.
Oh
We
my
always have
gosh.
people who are showing up, helping us out, or just here on an, like, what would you call it, like an interim status, stuff like that. But generally, the core is 9 people. And as I said, we had like 30 plus over the course of the development.
That's a good sized development team, and it kind of shows because this does seem like a pretty quality product. Even though, again, I am terrible at it. Again, folks, don't take the video as an indicator of the quality of the game. No, I'm just horrible at it. I'm really so bad at it. But eventually, you are going to have, and I didn't get to this yet, but there are going to be spaceships. Now, are the ships pre-made, or do you have to build them? How do ships come into the game?
At the moment, you actually have one ship uh, outside of your station when you start. This is basically how you move around the system. The ship is definitely pre-designed and pre-made. We currently have only one ship in the game, and it serves as a utility vessel that helps you locate other modules at other spots in the orbits, and it also helps you to tow all those modules back to your base so you can start assembling and docking different modules and generally expanding your base.
Oh, okay. I must not have realized. Well, I must not have realized one of those things outside was a ship. And by the way, I said this earlier, but I wanted to just say it live. Your game did such a good job twinging my fear of heights. I actually had like serious, like my chest was tightening at one point. Like when I got blown away from one of the stations because of the decompression, I seriously started getting anxiety. Like like not a full blown like panic attack, but it really like kicked in that fear of heights and whatnot that makes me refuse to watch Gravity. So well done. Well,
Yeah, well, that was one of the general ideas behind creating Hellion. We didn't want to create like your run-of-the-mill sci-fi story with metallic textures and neon blue lights and stuff like that. Wanted to go into a more realistic feel, and actually let players experience space the way it is. So yes, getting flung out of the airlock and slowly running out of resources can be quite a horrifying experience, actually.
I got to be honest.
It's great for the immersion.
It's great for immersion, but I got to be honest. Even watching the video that I took is actually making me a little, whew, right now. I'm not even kidding. It's like, oh boy, I shouldn't be watching the OBS right now because, oh gosh, whew, I'm not even kidding. Wow, good job on that. Because, oh boy, okay, I'm just gonna cover half of my face and not look at my second monitor right now.
Okay, come on, it can't be that bad, eh?
I have a serious fear of terrifying fear of heights, terrifying fear, and so your game did again great job, and that is really a testament to how good the game is, because damn. We have another question. I don't know how serious this one is. Ask Smorty where the railguns are. This is from Timothy Scott over on YouTube. Is that an inside joke?
Well, I'm not sure what he means. Most of the weapons in the Hellion system in the game are basically railguns. So your rifles are essentially railguns. Your pistols are railguns. Sentries are also railguns. However, if he's asking about ship-based weaponry, these are not in the game yet.
Oh, but they're gonna be. So could you like get on a ship that'll eventually have weapons and like rip someone else's station apart with them in it?
We're still working on some of these mechanics. One problem that we ran into is how to reconcile full Newtonian flight model along with full orbital mechanics and space combat. It may sound like simple and easy, but it's kind of a little difficult. You know, it's a tough nut to crack. We have some ideas, and we're working on these. But in general, ship weapons are still not in the game. But as I said, we're working on a few different things, and they will probably enter the game at a certain point in the development.
Right, of course. I mean, you guys, like, how long what is your roadmap looking like? Like, do you have any idea when you'll hit beta? Do you have any idea when you'll hit release, for example?
In general, our original plan was after the early access release in Steam that happened in February this year, we planned to have about a year and a half for development until we hit like a full release. However, based on the community feedback, and as I said, there's a lot of it. We started kind of changing roadmap slightly, and at this point, it's looking like it might be more than a year and a half. Still not sure exactly how much, but there's a lot of very good suggestions, very good gameplay ideas coming from the community, and we are still working on finding a proper way into implementing many of these features as we go along.
It does make more sense to take your time with it. Take the time you need to do it right, because you can only go to full release once, and the state you release in, that's what people are going to see. If you're in that early access for 2 years, but you release very well, then people are going to be much more forgiving than if you try to push to the year and a half point, release early, and people will say, well, you needed more time in the oven to get it right.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, those are our thoughts exactly. We still are working, especially on getting this space feel part right. So we want to make space a little bit more deadly than it already is.
More deadly?
So...
Are you kidding me? Oh my god!
Maybe a tad more deadly.
Oh my god!
Let's not say deadly. Let's say more challenging. That's it.
I was gonna say, because I died real fast. I think I lasted 16 minutes before I died because I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah, that's how long your oxygen runs.
Yeah, pretty much. It was really funny, actually. I just when my character died, I just laughed. Like, you're an idiot, Ruben. You're such an idiot. But yeah, Spaz has the right of it. Like, especially because the survival genre is a bit crowded right now. And space is also shockingly crowded. So one of the ways to differentiate yourself, we have found, is to really have a solid release. Like, there's a game that just came out, I won't mention its name, that was in early access for 1 month. And I was shocked when they went to release. And their game doesn't feel anywhere near complete. Like, at all. And because they went to release, I had to be honest and review it. And I was kind of savage, you know? But they deserved it. So, yeah, take your time. Take your time to do it right, as the song says.
Well, as I said, that's part of our plan. We do not want to kind of push half-baked or unfinished features into the game. We're going into optimization. We're testing the features extensively at this point. We're working with the community. They're helping us test out many of the ideas. They often come up with certain ideas that we may have missed, and it's actually a very... And our idea is to release a with most of its core mechanics fully fleshed out, fully finished, to actually give players, how should we put it, a lot of fun for the money that they're putting up front for the game.
What would you say are some of the either best or most surprising ideas you've gotten from the community so far?
Well, there's been a lot, and let's just say that it's not exactly ideas, how much people are actually trying to emulate or replicate different kind of movie scenes, and or getting them by accident within the game. So we're already having people using like engines to try and do the Expanse-like maneuvers, flying across half a system.
Yes.
And they're actually doing it.
Oh my
it's
gosh.
very difficult, but people are actually doing those things. I also had a lot of different suggestions, especially for the way communications are working, the scanners, how warp drive could be tweaked. Generally, a lot of good suggestions, and on occasion, it's pretty hard to actually keep track of all of these.
Yeah, what are you using to keep track of them? Like Trello or something?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, I mean, it's awesome that people are doing all these things to give you ideas. Like they're trying to break things. They're trying to, emulate things. That's pretty great. Frank in YouTube says that someone on the Space Engineers community team is regularly streaming your game. So I'd say that's a nice compliment.
Yeah, well, the point is there's not a large number of games which are focused to this extent on certain amount of realism within the game. Space Engineers would definitely be one of such games, but generally we've noticed that most people who generally like Space Engineers are also interested in Hellion, and the games are kind of different in that sense, but they do offer a similar feel in a sense.
Right. Would you say there are any games that helped inspire Hellion?
Yes, in general, there are games that we used to play a lot, and a few of the ideas, for Hellion came. You've played Faster Than Light, right?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Well, one of the original ideas behind Hellion was what would it look like if Faster Than Light was in first person, and everyone was like a member of a crew on board a ship.
Yeah, that there are some games that are attempting that as well, and so far they've been pretty fun. So I like that is also the inspiration for this, honestly.
Yeah. We used that and many other games as inspiration. Most of the guys from the office are fans of space games in general. And then we also have people who are fans of traditional survival games like Rust or DayZ and Ark, and every similar game, similar survival genre. And we're basically drawing our inspiration from all of them. We're just trying to put this space feel, space twist onto it, because so far as very few people have actually tried to fully explore the zero gravity mechanics and what's actually look like.
Right, and again, you guys have done the zero gravity thing quite well. I guess one suggestion I would have is maybe some kind of. Is this in the game? Maybe I should see it. Some kind of like tether you can attach to something, so like when there's decompression, you don't fly so far, like a whip or something like that. You know.
That would be the shift key, if I'm not mistaken. You
Well,
can hold
that
shift to open up the door, and
yeah,
then you don't fly away.
Right, but I would love something like
You know that we've reduced the force of decompression.
Oh God,
when
really?
opening the doors.
Oh no.
It was worse. I recall that. Yes.
Oh Jesus! Because now I was thinking something like if you do get blown out, something you can like lasso to something nearby, like I don't know, some kind of grappling. Maybe this isn't realistic, but some kind of like Just Cause style grappling hook. You know, I could just grapple to something and not fly off a million miles away.
Magnetic tether.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We've had a lot of suggestions like this coming from the community, and we are still working on, how should I put it, making it a little bit friendlier, especially for new players, you know, easier to get their bearings inside zero gravity, because generally the motion is a lot different compared to most other games.
It really is.
But we are considering a few options, and we'll still see if they're going to get implemented or if we're simply going to rework a few features, you know, to make at least the initial experience for players a little bit more pleasant, should we put it.
Like maybe have a newbie server or a couple of newbie servers so new players could like, and maybe I don't know if Unity could do bots. Maybe have a bot take them through zero G training, you know, something like that. Because yeah, I don't know if you're watching the video, but I was flailing around like I was having a spasm because I had no idea what I was doing.
Yep, I noticed.
I'm sorry, it's probably embarrassing. Hopefully more so for me than for your game.
Oh, well, in general, you know, we've had videos, you know, that fared better, videos that fared worse.
I can't imagine anyone doing much worse than I did. I mean, unless someone like 2 minutes in, what does putting up your helmet do? Oh, like that's the only way I could really see.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, Archangel actually on Twitch. Archangel actually, there is a command where you hold the like Spaz was saying, you hold the shift button, and apparently that is supposed to like have your character hold on to like a wall or something while the door opens. But I never remembered to use it, and I think the one time I did, I probably didn't use it close enough to a wall. So
yeah, you have the option to when you're in space, when you're in zero gravity and flying around, you can use shift to stabilize your rotation. It's not going to stabilize your linear motion, but it's going to stabilize your rotation relative to an. Though, as mentioned, you can hold shift when you are near doors or near the hull of a station, and your character will like automatically grab onto it.
So, since this is a multiplayer game, are there going to be any kinds of things you can implement so people won't just be a dick to each other and like, oh, I'm just going to ruin your station, or I'm just going to throw you out an airlock? Or is that the kind of thing that you want people to be able to do? You know what I mean? Like, are there going to be like server options, you know, that sort of thing?
It's kind of something that we originally kind of envisioned for Hellion. We didn't want to put any like AI or proper PvE kind of encounters. We wanted to rely entirely on multiplayer interaction between other players. But considering the difficulty and the general learning curve that the game has, we're looking at a lot more people are actually grouping up to just play together and try to survive together, because doing so in a team is a lot easier than trying to pull it off solo. And we don't have too many people griefing other people out there, although it still does happen. So our general idea is that there was no AI, no PvE or anything. However, somewhere along the way, we decided to implement the automated sentries. Their primary purpose was to make space exploration a little bit more dangerous. So when you encounter like a derelict cluster, there's also a chance that a turret may come online and attack you. But primarily, they were put in to allow players to better secure their stations from potential looters and raiders. But the entire concept of automated turrets as kind of AI opponents was pretty well received, and it's kind of started us thinking. So I can't say exactly, which way the AI, or these things are going to go, but we're definitely experimenting with them, and we'll of course put it through the community approval before we decide, to implement any such sort of a mechanic in the game. But the feedback so far regarding turrets, for example, was overwhelmingly positive.
That's good.
Oh,
now,
no.
are you using Photon for your multiplayer?
Excuse me.
Are you using I was wondering what service you were using for your hosting.
Second, I'll just have to check correctly with one of my colleagues.
Sure.
What is, for folks who don't know like me, what is that?
So Photon is actually the cloud-based server hosting that we use with Quintet. And so it allows you to have servers all over the world, but you don't actually have to physically own the server. You just rent the servers out. Now, I was taking a guess that it was Photon because it looked like the Photon server browser that not that we specifically use, but that other games have used.
In general, yes, we are generally renting servers, and in general, let me just check with my colleague what he said.
Is that like an Amazon thing? The thing?
It's Photon is it's all cloud based. So you can have, say, a US West, US East server, or just a US server that covers both. There are servers in Europe, Asia. You can have a Australia server, that sort of thing, and you just rent by location.
Okay. We are definitely using like server hosting, but we are not using cloud-based architecture, cloud-based servers because it's a Windows game after all. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And a follow up on that would be: is there any sort of plan for privately host servers, not necessarily user hosted, but a friends only sort of server that I could say invite my 4 friends to, and then they all join and we play together without having to worry about other people joining on?
Yes, this is something that we already have implemented. There was a lot of requests. Initially, we just wanted to go with public servers, or allow other players to like rent their own servers. But in the end, we went with the ability to allow players to activate their own servers, so they can install a server client. They can they can run a server off their own computer and set a password protected. It is visible on the community-based server list, but if you put a password, you can only invite, like friends that you want to play with. And a lot of people are already doing that, and they're setting up their own servers. They're also setting up they're playing with kind of modding the game to a certain degree, changing some of the mechanics and rules.
Okay, great.
We do have a question from YouTube, something about fixing the locking system. Are there any plans to fix the locking system, is the question.
Yeah, at some point we decided to implement the security option into the game that would allow players to actually secure their station in better way. And so far, these glitches slide that showed up have been fixed. Next updates, and we're going to work on a full system that will allow you to lock down like your station completely.
Oh, that's pretty great. So how do you get pieces to build stations? Do you craft them? I mean, how does station building happen?
What we're the system is you find these derelict clusters. When you get into your ship, you do a scan, and it's going to show you nearby objects in the orbits around you. So you go to these locations, and mostly you will find like broken down derelicts that you can do very little with. But you can also find like full station modules that you can grab with your ship and then tow them back to your base. Then you use these modules to basically as building blocks to create a station.
Oh wow. So different people can make different stations, and are they like different? Are they the same for every server or every instance? Are they procedurally generated? Like how does the derelict stuff work out?
They're procedurally generated, and we have a rather complex system that governs how these modules are spawned, where they're spawned, in which orbits, etc. They're mostly random, but we do have as a, how would you put it, like a spawn chance for both the items that spawn in them and the modules themselves. They also respawn after a while in case your station is lost or you just can't find the module that you're looking for. And the loot is also distributed differently across different planets. So going to certain planets and certain moons will provide a higher chance of finding like military loot or something for your crew quarters, or say a drill or mining canisters, etc.
Oh, that's pretty awesome, actually. So people can they're going to be all different types of stations all over the place. It sounds like that people can make. And
Yeah, we already have some pretty interesting orbital architecture going on with people connecting many different modules and trying out different layouts, etc.
And is there? 'Cause I didn't get to see it, but is there like a separate building interface for locking these all this stuff together?
No, not really. What you do is each module that is floating out there has like this RCS system on it that allows you to access it, and then you can pilot it in a similar way that you pilot a ship or move your character around. So what you need to do is do a proper alignment approach with the module, and once you get it close enough, the clamps connect, and you simply add it like that. So the building process is a lot more engaging.
Oh, so it's like you're actually docking each piece of the station yourself.
Exactly.
Oh, that actually does sound a lot more engaging. A little more time consuming, but I would think it's probably more satisfying in the end than just a drag and drop type of system that a lot of building games implement. That sounds awesome, actually.
We actually wanted to put our focus on a little bit more of like realism rather than what you described like drag and drop systems. So the idea was to immerse the player into this world, and once you connect multiple modules by yourself or with a few friends, there is this sense of actually achieving something, because it takes a lot of skill to successfully dock either a ship or a module. It takes a lot of practice, until you can do it like in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's. I can only imagine that probably takes a lot of practice because just flailing about in a suit, like as you see on the video, would probably take a lot of practice to get down. I mean, the zero G stuff is just so throws me off. Uh, but not a lot of games implement like full zero G. So was that tough to implement in Unity, or was that easy? Because I don't really know Unity very well. But the zero G felt, and I've never been in zero G, but it felt realistic it felt like I would expect zero G to feel, So it felt right, you know what I mean? So how hard was that to implement?
Well, in general, implementing, as far as from the programming side, wasn't too much of an issue to implement. The more bigger problem would be how to properly explain to the player what is happening or what's going on. We did a lot of work on the UI to actually allow players to get all the relevant information, feel it. But we actually wanted to make like a fully realistic system. So unlike other games where you, let's say, you hold forward and your character moves forward at a steady speed, in Hellion what happens is you're accelerating as long as you're holding a button pressed. So you need to manage your acceleration, you need to manage your deceleration, and you need to watch your relative velocity to other objects, because the bigger problem here was implementing the full orbital mechanics, because nothing in Hellion is static. Everything is constantly moving. During that video where you're flying around, both your station and the ship that was near it are actually moving at a speed of about 25 kilometers per second on their orbit.
Oh, okay. That actually does make a lot of sense. And I was about to ask a question from someone on YouTube, but someone, I don't know if that's you or someone else, but someone already answered it. So never mind. Apparently RCS was having an issue, but that's going to be fixed. So good. So what are some of the next big things you plan to implement in your game in, say, the next few months, like, or the next few patches? What are some of the next big things you want to either fix or add?
One thing that will be implemented over the course of the next, say, a month, maybe 2 months at best, although I think it's going to be probably earlier, is going to be a full hit point system for all the modules, along with damage and degradation and repairing for all these modules. It's going to be pretty basic once it comes in, but the idea is to test how well it works within the game, and to see how community reacts to it. The idea is that you need to actually repair your models, because they will slowly degrade over time due to exposure to space radiation and other elements like extreme temperatures, etc. So repair and damage are going to come in first, and then we're going to build upon that system a little bit further once it actually goes live.
Okay, that's pretty cool. We have a question from Twitch. Can you move your station out of orbit?
Yes, you can move your station out of orbit. However, there is a limit to the number of docked modules that your ship can tow at once. So what you need to do is you need to disconnect your station. You've actually managed to do it quite a few times in the video by pulling those docking levers. So you undock, basically unconnect all the modules, and then you can dock them to your ship and use the ship to warp them, or use the engines to change your orbit and go into a different orbit, and then just tow the modules over there and reconnect the station on the spot.
Okay, and you brought it up a couple times, but there is a warp capability in the game?
Yes, one of the reasons why we had to implement warp is because of the realistic distances that we put into Hellion. Using engines, basically, many people have requested features that would be pretty close to like KSP or Kerbal Space Program. Unfortunately, as a multiplayer game, we do have an issue with that because most games that have fully realistic orbital mechanics and traditional space flight have some form of a time acceleration mechanic, which only works in single-player games. These maneuvers are kind of possible at this point, but we use warp to basically cut down on the time it would take to travel between 2 planets or 2 moons, etc. That is one of the primary reasons the warp is in the game.
No, that makes sense. I mean, you could either do that or some kind of time acceleration thing where, like, hit a fast forward button and 2 days pass or something. But, warp, I'm sure is just as fine.
Well, you can't really push a button and fast forward time for 2 days in a multiplayer game.
Oh God, that's right. It's multiplayer. I'm sorry. That makes total sense.
Yeah, it works in something like Pulsar, where everybody's on the same ship,
right?
And then you're all warping together.
God. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. We have another question. Will there be asteroid fields, and can you set stations on asteroids?
There are asteroids in the game at this point. They are usually in very wide orbits around massive planets like gas giants. However, the asteroid fields are not exactly in the game in that sense. For now, we have like asteroids on pretty much stable orbits around planets. There are some thoughts about implementing something that would resemble like a traditional movie-like asteroid field, but they won't be. These things won't be coming into the game anytime soon because we still need to work heavily on the optimization to further improve the frame rate before we actually decide to tackle something like that.
And you guys have done a great job with the frame rate. Would you say that the optimization is the biggest challenge you guys have to deal with right now?
In a sense, yes. It is proving like pretty difficult to properly and correctly optimize many of the aspects of the game, and this is basically what's taking a lot of. That's what a lot of our efforts went into over the course of the past few months.
Yeah, like I said, you can definitely tell because like it's not like last time it was herky jerky, and this time it's totally not herky jerky. Uh, so let's see. What would you say is the most complicated thing about getting a game like this to run? Is it the orbital mechanics? Is it getting the all the different systems working together, like life support and energy and stuff like that? Because this is a very complex game, and so there's got to be a lot of moving parts, and I'm just wondering what the toughest parts are to get moving together.
Yeah, one of the biggest issues that comes from it is, as you mentioned, full orbital mechanics, because we need to know the position of each and every object at every time, and it needs to be calculated in real time over the server, so the objects in different orbits can properly sync. The problem here is that in most games, when you have like a static map where the players are standing, this does not pose a problem. However, let's say that character A desyncs compared to character B for just a few seconds, and at that point they are both moving at incredible orbiting speeds. So let's say you lag for a single second, the position does not update correctly, and you will find yourself like 10 kilometers away.
Ugh. That's probably terrifying.
That would basically be one of the largest issues that we're handling right now is the orbital mechanics itself, and properly syncing everything happening on the server in real time. So
Yeah, that. Oh yeah, and especially since it's multiplayer. That probably adds its own layer of complication, making sure everything is in sync with other people. Yeah, it sounds like you guys have an amazing juggling act here. Just
yeah, well, it's never boring over here in the studio. So
yeah,
I'd imagine not.
And I saw that there are weapons in the game. Is it like one shot, one kill type of thing? Like you hole someone and their suit explodes, or can their suit like seal itself up, and maybe they have to get to a med kit or something before someone else dies? I mean, how does combat work in this?
well, we decided to go with let's call them automatically sealing suits, because we honestly did not want to go with like being 100% realistic where one bullet would like rip your suit and you would suffocate. So basically it's not one shot one kill. You have different weapons that all have different damage that can do, and some have better recoil, some have worse, etc. But the only weapon that I can think of that is like a one-shot, one-kill would be the Lance sniper rifle, which is kind of rare to find in the game. But in general, when you do manage to find a player or try to board his ship in this sense, ship or a station, you are in for a pretty interesting showdown if both players are into it. Basically, we also had a few videos. Some people are playing like cooperatively, building their bases, working together. And we've also had a few very interesting videos being uploaded of some pretty intense boarding action between 2 players, 3 players or more.
Man, that does kind of sound awesome.
Oh, and you do have med packs in game that you can use to heal yourself in case you get shot at or punch a wall due to decompression, etc.
So I have to ask about the balancing act because of we've talked about warp drive, we've talked about the self-sealing suits and whatnot. I have to ask about the balancing act you guys are trying to strive between full-on realism and playability with the warp drive, with the self-sealing suits. Like, how difficult is it to walk that line between making it really realistic? That's hard to say. Really realistic, but still playable and fun from a science fiction perspective.
We're trying to maintain a certain dose of realism, but we do not want to let realism interfere with the gameplay. Realism is there to add to the gameplay, to add to the immersion of the game, and certain things, if they had been done like fully realistic, we believe it would take a lot from the gameplay and turn the game from something that is fun to do into something that is actually tiresome. And that's one thing we're trying to avoid. So it is a fine line that we're trying to walk between realism, immersion, and gameplay, but gameplay will always take precedent over full realism, at least in our case.
Yeah, that's...
Well, you want to be a game, not a simulator specifically.
Exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good attitude, because I can only imagine, like, you still want to stay realistic, but all these people want laser guns and things and phasers. It's like, nope. we're trying to be somewhat realistic, but still fun. So I can only imagine that temptation, though, to go like full Star Trek sometimes, you know?
Yeah, well, we do have this kind of like low-tech setting that we wanted to do. So Hellion would basically have the technology like similar to what we're using today, just kind of accelerated like maybe century or two into the future at best. That is the idea that we wanted to go with, not have teleports, not have like laser weapons, shields, or different kinds of like that. We simply wanted to make it feel a little bit more, would I put it, down to earth, closer to our time today than it, let's say, Star Trek. So we're probably going to maintain that kind of align along with the game as we go further with the development process.
And oh man, I just had a question and it totally left my head.
Well, last one. Go ahead.
No, so basically, is it like, because you're only going a century in the future, so is it tough to like balance like what we might have in 100 years with what we have now? Like, because you don't want to go too far ahead and again say we have laser guns, but you'll want to be future-y enough to still feel like science fiction. Is that a tough balancing act?
Yes, well, there's a lot of, let's say, series and sci-fi novels that can serve as a great source of inspiration when designing like the lore setting for the game. But the Hellion is actually a little bit further into the future. We're talking about year, let's say, 24th century is when things are happening. But the travel and everything took its toll, and the idea is to create a believable environment, and we are always working on trying to kind of base what we are putting into the game, at least from the lore perspective, to base it on some of the principles we already have it today on Earth. So for example, the engines are basically working in a way like fusion torch engines. Then we have the warp drive that is based on the warp drive that NASA was working on and trying to experiment with. Right. The RCS thrusters use the mechanics that we already have existing on the ISS and in the space program in general. They just use a different type of fuel that they are experimenting like this. The weapons in game would basically be railguns, the concept that already exists, just miniaturized, and generally things like that.
Yeah, see, that sounds much more like realistic, like in like you're going into the like expanse type of direction rather than the Star Trek like direction. There's definitely room for that, more room for that in science fiction because it feels like a lot more people go the Star Trek route, which is probably a little easier because you don't have to worry about it because that's kind of almost fantasy, really, if you think about it. Yeah, the
Yeah, well,
transporters.
science fiction and science fantasy. Yes, we're generally really big fans of the Expanse series over at the studio, and we were really surprised when we saw the show come out. And it's a pretty awesome show, and it actually kind of showed certain things, how they could be done because it's a really well done, really well written show. And as I said, we're huge fans of it.
Yeah, I don't see how anyone couldn't be. I mean, uh, just a side note, it took a while for me to get on board because I read all the books and the casting like totally threw me off. Like this is
You and me
not
both.
this is not how oh yeah, oh you had the same issue. Like this is not how I saw most of these people in my head. Like the one I felt that got closest was Naomi and the rest of them were like that's not how I thought Alex would look and definitely not how I thought Holden would look. But so it took like 5 or 6 episodes for me to get on board with them. But especially the guy that plays Amos, I think he nailed it first for me. I think he did a great job. Um, but now, I mean, I still have to finish season 2. But oh, and the guy that got to play Miller, Thomas Jane, yeah, he was perfect,
Oh
utterly,
yeah. Oh yeah.
utterly,
I have to
utterly,
agree with that.
utterly perfect as Miller. Like totally 100%. But yeah, everyone else is like, what? So yeah, if you guys haven't seen The Expanse and you're watching a space game podcast, you should go watch The Expanse. I mean, seriously, read the books too. The books are amazing. Like the show is really good. The books are incredible. Oh my god, have you read all of them? Have you read? Are you caught up?
I've read most of them. I'm still kind of waiting on reading the last one because I have that funny feeling, that once I read it, what am I going to read next?
They just released a small novella that that takes place, I think, after the most recent larger novel. So that I still have to read that, but that's something. So yeah, but I've read like every bit of The Expanse except for that one novella. That and I totally feel you. Like once you're done, you're like, oh, it's like I want more.
Exactly.
I want more right now.
Yeah, well, personally, I'm a big fan of hard science fiction, so I read a lot of different things. But The Expanse is definitely one of the novels that really surprised me because they really try to put it like really down to earth. And as Spaz mentioned, it did remind me a lot of the Planetus anime.
What is the name of that anime?
I think it's Planetus, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it is.
Planetus?
Well, the way it's spelled is Planet ES.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And you were explaining it before the show. So could you explain to the folks who are listening now who didn't hear the explainer?
So, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, Spaz, you go ahead.
Well, the idea is that salvage teams are in our far future going around our Earth's orbit and collecting all of the garbage that's out there from all the derelict space stations because all of that debris traveling at very high speeds in our orbit can be very devastating to whatever it happens to hit.
And that's generally something that players do in Hellion without really realizing. So you go to a cluster of derelicts, you pick up a few models that you need, you take them to your base. So you're making universe a safer place, actually.
Or if you're playing a pirate, then it's less safe for everybody else, but still.
Everyone's doing their part, even the pirates.
Now, is there a
Fair
way?
enough.
Is there a way you could say throw a piece of like a piece of a station into another piece of a station? Like, is there that capability. Like, say I wanted to be a real asshole and take a piece of a derelict and say I don't like that guy's station over there, and tractor it and hurl it at that other station. You know, could you do that?
Well, I did mention that we're implementing full damage mechanics and repair mechanics. That's probably going to come along with collision mechanics. So yeah,
you
pretty soon.
Okay.
I gotta say that's one of my favorite things about these sort of sci-fi things is like, oh, things crashing into other things and causing all kinds of problems. I kind of love that. So I'm really excited to hear that.
Well, considering that we have like full Newtonian mechanics over there, and that we don't really have a upper speed cap within the game,
Oh
because
no.
it would kind of break realism. And the engines of a ship are pretty powerful. The RCS is manageable, but engines, they're pretty powerful. So you can achieve some pretty crazy speeds, like in a minute or something like that. So
Oh man. So yeah, I would love to like just once be a dick and get a piece of a derelict and like find a buddy station and hurl it into that station and totally ruin their day. That just sounds so much fun to me.
There's also another thing you can do without like hurling objects at him. What you can basically do is dock to a person station, align it, like you would like, and then use your engines to deorbit it and just let it crash in a few days.
That's great. Oh.
And since the game is persistent, it can happen while the person's offline, if they're offline for a few days.
Oh, that's evil, and I love it.
Although, as I said, it's going to take some time, because even if you like fully deorbit the station around the gas giant, it's still going to take it some time before it actually crashes into the planet. So a person can still kind of come online and try to save his station.
I can't imagine that'd be easy. You probably applying reverse thrust and whatnot. I can't imagine that'd be easy if you hurl it fast enough.
Yeah, it happened a few times, even to you guys over here at the studio while we're playing. Let's say that we miscalculate our warp course and the warp drops us at a very close proximity to a planet or a moon, and then it's like, okay, where are the engines? How am I gonna miss it? No, too bad.
That's I kind of love how those kind of mistakes can happen. That is great because that's where the stories come from, is crazy stuff like that.
Well, in general, yeah, a lot of the stories that we have, as I said, we have a pretty active community there, and people have started sharing their adventures, especially with other players, and turning them into real stories. And those are always very fun to read through. And we have all different kinds of gameplay coming out of it, with systems malfunctioning or someone accidentally like depressurizing a station, and then like someone not having a suit who now has to stay inside his cryopod until people go out to bring him a new suit and stuff like that. It can get pretty interesting, especially when it starts by someone making a mistake.
That is pretty great. That is pretty great because this is the kind of environment where you want to make no mistakes, because a little tiny mistake can get you killed. So that is pretty great. I just sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's general. If you do everything by the book, the game is fun. However, if you're playing with others and you start making mistakes, either deliberately or accidentally, that's when things get really messed up, and then it really becomes a struggle for survival. Why did you vent that? We don't have enough oxygen. Okay, we need to get new oxygen. So then you're transferring your oxygen from your ship to the station. You're refilling your suit with just a little bit. Then you're trying to equalize the pressure between the rooms so it's just barely breathable and things like that. So when someone does make a mistake, it can actually create a really good adventure.
Yeah, I mean, things don't always go well in movies, or else it'd be the most boring movie in the world. Like everything went great. Oh. Okay. There's no conflict? Oh. Fine. But this sounds like a great chaos simulator as well, and that to me sounds the most fun. Like I don't want to be that guy, but I kind of want to be that guy that kind of goes in and just, I'm just going to decompress these few airlocks and start the station moving. That would be me.
Oops.
We do have a question. Timothy Scott over on YouTube asks when the next patch will drop.
We're expecting next patch to drop. It's probably going to drop this week around Thursday. We've moved our update schedule recently from a 2-week period. We've moved it over to a month period, as it gives us more time, to properly test and implement new features that we're adding. And it also allows more time for the players to actually enjoy building their stations and playing, because with each new update we're still doing like server wipes after a certain period of time. So now we're on a, what you could call it, a monthly cycle that we're doing. And yes, we expect the next patch to be ready and deployed on Thursday this week.
Okay, that's pretty great. So yeah, a month sounds very reasonable for a game with this many moving parts, especially since it's a multiplayer game. That sounds totally reasonable. Especially because, again, you gotta do the server wipes. Now, when you finally hit 1.0, you're gonna do like one last server wipe, or you're gonna let people keep like stuff they had in beta? Like, do you have any plan for that?
We're possibly going to. I'm still not sure, but coming, from our perspective, and we would like to, once the game finally goes live, as you said, we hit version 1.0. We would probably want to give all the players, equal starting opportunity, of course, when they start the game fresh. Of course, those who played before, those who have been stayed with us through the early access period and everything, will of course have all of their experience with them, and they will kind of have a head start compared to other players. But we would probably like to give everyone an equal opportunity.
No, that totally makes sense. I mean, I know some games, like, if you get in the beta, you can keep your stuff once you go live. But for a game like this, it makes sense to have everyone start on equal footing. Because there's just
I would say the experience is more valuable than a head start, because if you know what you're doing, you're going to have that head start, and you'll have a better chance of getting what you need when you need it.
In general, what we have happening often is new players join to a server, and they start going to the chat like, how do I do this, or how do I do that? And then usually what happens is someone with more experience, who's been playing the game for the last few months and knows his ways in and way out, would usually invite the person or request an invite to spawn with him in a cryo chamber, and then they kind of act as veterans, guiding those who have freshly started, throughout the game. And that experience is pretty fun. I've also done it a couple of times, helping people who are new to the game, and it definitely helps new players adapt a little better to the how would I put it, the difficulty of the game, and it smoothens out a little the learning curve, because having someone show you how to do it properly goes a long way into actually helping you to figure out how to properly move in zero G, or how the systems work, or how to plot the warp course, etc. It's a completely different experience compared to, let's say, playing solo completely.
Yeah, anyone can read a guide, but it actually takes skill to teach another player how to do what you know.
And regarding those possible mistakes, it also helps a lot that if you make a mistake, there is someone out there to actually help you.
Right, because they may not know what they did wrong that caused everything to decompress.
Yeah, that's one of the common things that happens when people just kind of go and open the doors and go out. Pressure is actually one of the mechanics that you don't get to see often in games, and we've decided to implement it like right from the start. So not only lack of oxygen is not the only problem or the only thing that's going to kill you. Pressure is also equally important, and managing it has become an integral part of the gameplay.
Right. Speaking of that, you have components that will degrade, like the air filters will have, the air filter has a couple of components to that which can degrade over time. So you have to go to other derelicts and find replacement parts. Will there be any sort of way to manufacture those parts yourself if you need to?
For now, we are these parts and replacement parts for different systems are can only be found. Now, there are plans to add the ability to players to kind of make replacements for themselves, but this is still in development. So I would rather refrain, on talking too much about it until we have a proper system, and it's properly tested and properly implemented. But for now, players go around, they can, you find many different derelicts floating around. You go find the parts that you need, you replace them. Also, the entire system management part is still undergoing some changes and rework. So in the future, the system is going to get a lot more, how to put it, a little bit more complex, but also more user-friendly. It will be easier for players to understand what is happening. We're reworking the UI to do exactly that, to always provide the necessary information for the player at any time. So if you want to know what the system does, it needs to be apparent to the player. And that is one of the complaints that we received from our users, from our community, and we are working on making information more accessible to the players where they need it, when they need it.
It's great. It's great to hear.
Yeah, that sounds super important. Well, we gotta start wrapping up. But I think we've hit all the points I wanted to hit. Spaz, is there anything?
No, same.
Okay, great. So Milos, I'm gonna try. Did I say? Okay, I think I said it right. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to us about Hellion. Folks, the game is Hellion. How much is it going for on Steam? Is it about $20? I think.
Yeah, something like that.
$20. It is a space survival game. It is in alpha right now. So there's a lot coming, a lot of work to do. But if you can see from my video, it already seems fairly, I don't know if complete's the right word, but it feels pretty, it runs well. It already feels like it's got a lot in there already. There's a lot more to do, clearly, but there's quite a bit here that if you're into survival and whatnot, there's a lot to like, I think, here. So yeah, definitely check it out. And just a couple of programming notes. This Thursday, we are going to be playing Helldivers. That is what the wheel chose for last week, so that's going to be on the LAN party on Thursday. And then next week, for the show, we are going to be welcoming, we're doing another morning show next week because we are welcoming the developers of Interstellar Space Genesis, the 4X game from the folks at the former space news site Space Sector. They're now making a Master of Orion homage clone thing, Master of Orion 2 clone thing, and so we're going to be talking about that. It's actually really good based on what I've played of the alpha so far. So that's next week on the show. I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. And if you haven't, please subscribe, like, join us on Discord, on Facebook. We have very active communities, and you're more than welcome to stop by. We love games. We love talking about games. So please stop by. And again, Milos, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today. Your game looks awesome, and you can definitely tell there's a lot of love and passion about it. Not just the way you talk about it, but just in the game in general. You can tell this is definitely a labor of love. So thank you for making it and for joining us today.
Hey, it was my pleasure. It was great being here and having this conversation. It was fun.
Yeah, it was. Spaz, thank you, as always, for being an awesome co-host. And folks, we will see you next week. Have a great day, y'all. Bye-bye.